Welcome to The Explainer, where we take complex history and, well, make it make sense.
So, what if the most powerful force in shaping North America wasn't an army or a political party, but a secret society? It's a pretty bold claim, right? But the source material for this explainer suggests that the principles of Freemasonry actually did more to build a civilization than all the famous battles we learn about in school.
If that's true, it basically makes Freemasons the unseen architects of a new nation. From famous founders meeting in city taverns to rugged pioneers out on the raw frontier, the ideas of this fraternity were apparently woven right into the fabric of American expansion. So today, we're going to dig into this hidden history. We'll start with their role as these unseen architects. Then we'll trace their path out west. We'll meet the founders and frontiersmen who were involved, see how they survived war and intense suspicion, and finally, uncover the lasting legacy they left behind.
All right, let's jump right in. Our story really begins with an influence that was powerful precisely because it was so quiet. This wasn't about big public declarations or political campaigns. It was all about the private character and civic action of its members.
So, why is this history so often overlooked? Well, according to our source, it's because traditional history tends to focus on the loud stuff. Conflicts, politics. It misses the quieter but incredibly powerful role the fraternity played in building the civic life of the nation. The courts, the schools, the communities that are really the bedrock of a functioning country. Okay, so let's see how this influence started to spread. It wasn't just confined to the 13 colonies. As Americans pushed west into pretty much untamed territory, Masonic ideals traveled right along with them, packed right alongside their rifles and their plows.
What's really fascinating is that this wasn't some top-down institutional plan. The spread of Masonry was totally organic. It happened because individual Masons carried its principles with them, they sought each other out, and then they worked together to build new societies literally from scratch, out in the wilderness.
And this expansion happened fast. Lodges weren't just social clubs. A lot of the time, they were the very first civic organizations in a new settlement. They were getting established years before a territory even became a state, providing structure and a kind of moral compass in what were often pretty lawless lands. This plea from the first lodge in Arizona, wow, it paints such a vivid picture of just how raw the conditions were. These guys weren't meeting in comfortable city buildings. They truly saw themselves as an outpost of civilization, using their bonds to create order and safety on a really dangerous and hostile frontier. Their dedication was just incredible. With no access to proper supplies, the Masons in Globe, Arizona simply improvised. They had a local tinsmith cut their ceremonial jewels out of plain old tin. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about their commitment to establishing a lodge on the very edge of civilization. So who exactly were these men? Who were the guys carrying Masonic ideals into the halls of power and all the way across the dusty frontier? Well, as it turns out, they were pretty much everybody who was anybody. The rosters of the earliest frontier lodges, they read like a who's who of civic leadership. We're talking about the governors, senators, judges, and military officers, the very people tasked with building a functional society from the ground up. So here's the crucial point. This wasn't just a hobby for them. It was totally intertwined with their public service. The principles of order, reason, and brotherhood they practiced in the lodge were the very same principles they used to draft laws and establish courts. The two roles weren't just inseparable, they were symbiotic. But this growth wasn't just a straight line. The fraternity faced enormous challenges from both within and without, real trials by fire that threatened to extinguish it completely. In the 1820s, a wave of anti-Masonic hysteria just swept the nation. This Morgan craze was fueled by suspicion and all kinds of conspiracy theories, and its effect was devastating. Lodges were forced to close. In Alabama, the Grand Lodge was so weakened that it just stopped meeting for 2 full years. But the greatest test was the Civil War, which pitted brother against brother in the most literal sense. Just look at the stark transformation of Arkansas Grandmaster Elbert H. English. In 1861, his words are full of secessionist fire, but by 1865, after the devastation of war, he makes this powerful plea for reconciliation, arguing that the bonds of Masonry cannot be severed by civil strife. So despite the anti-Masonic craze and the Civil War, the fraternity endured, and its legacy wasn't just in abstract ideals, but in the tangible institutions it built for the public good.
From their earliest days, Masons focused on putting their principles into practice. They established some of the very first large-scale charitable organizations in these new states, building homes for widows and orphans, funding hospitals, and even founding schools like St. John's College in Arkansas.
These charitable efforts resulted in real, physical places of refuge and care. The Alabama Masonic Home is a perfect example, a brick-and-mortar commitment to caring for the community's most vulnerable.
They also built magnificent temples that became architectural and civic landmarks. These weren't just meeting halls, they were statements about permanence, order, and civic pride in cities that were growing all across the nation.
And they honored leaders like Albert Pike of Arkansas. He was a complex figure, a lawyer, a Confederate general, and one of the most influential Masonic scholars in the world. His story really embodies the deep connection between Masonry and the shaping of American life and law.
And this brings us to a final thought. The story of Freemasonry on the frontier is a powerful reminder that history is more than just battles and presidents. It makes you wonder, what other quiet networks and unseen ideals have shaped the world we live in today?